Now it's time to welcome our Line Opinion panelists for the week. We're happy to be joined in studio by Tom Garrity, founder and president of the Garrity Group, Public Relations. Author and political psychologist Martha Burke is to his left. And across the table is attorney and public safety analyst Ed Perea. Thank you all for being here. I want to go back to Martha for a quick second. Martha is an author and also a podcast author? How do you say that? A podcast producer. That's it. What's the name of your podcast?
Equal Time with Martha Burke.
Look for it. Absolutely. All right. We start this week off with two of New Mexico's cabinet seats caught in local headlines. The governor's pick to lead the state's Indian Affairs Department was decried last month by members of one of the department's task forces, claiming allegations of rape 15 years ago should disqualify the nominee. Two members of the state's Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Relatives Task Force also threatened to leave the group following the governor's decision to nominate James R. Mountain to lead the department. Now, Mr. Mountain, a former governor and Supreme Court justice at the San Ildefonso tribe, was arrested in 2007, indicted in 2008 for charges of criminal sexual penetration, kidnapping, and aggravated battery against a household member. And the case was dismissed, Martha, in 2010, with the prosecution stating they had insufficient evidence to proceed. Now, how does a candidate with a history of these allegations get nominated for a secretary position by the governor? Is there something we're not seeing here? Because I have to assume the governor's people were fully aware of this background. What are we missing here?
How could they not be aware of this background, Gene? It's inexplicable. To me, it's Maxicronyism. I'm sorry, but it does. Because there was no compelling reason to appoint this man. There were compelling reasons not to.
Right.
As you say, it was lack of sufficient evidence. As our attorney who's sitting right here will tell you, that is not exoneration. And so why light that match? Right. I just don't see it. There's got to be a reason that we are not aware of. Again, there's a special favor, what is going on here, whether it's the governor herself or her people. As we say, somebody is doing something that's a little bit blinky to me. They could have avoided this whole thing. There are many people that could have been appointed for this position and not draw all this fire.
Isn't that, that's an interesting point, the last point you just made there. There's plenty of great candidates out there. You mentioned Ed Perea. Ed, I want to go to you on this as well. You know, the idea that Mr. Mountain, we're talking about criminal sexual penetration, kidnapping, aggravated battery against a household member. These are serious charges. I mean, very serious charges. I don't understand, from a law enforcement background, what does it take to get charged with these kind of things, and then obviously insufficient evidence to proceed for the case to go to trial? What's the difficulty?
It appears there's obviously a serious issue here. The fact that the case was dismissed, there are a whole lot of reasons why a case is dismissed. But for it to get that far, law enforcement and even the prosecutors should have at least some level of probable cause to believe that a crime occurred.
Right.
Now, that under our system, we're innocent until proven guilty. And what happened after that point, it's really hard. We don't know. We don't have all the details. But in our system, again, we're innocent until proven guilty, and if a case is dismissed, not knowing all the details, should that be held against an individual? There are a lot of people who are improperly charged, unfairly charged, and then cases are dismissed. And we don't know that here. We don't have enough information. But more importantly, I think the real issue is, does this create a distraction to the mission of the department? Is it enough of a distraction that the mission can't be carried out? That there are going to be trust issues? We really need to listen to those people who are concerned. We need to listen to the community. We need to listen to those people who are going to be affected by this decision, and then make a decision as to whether this individual can move forward effectively in that role.
Good points there. Tom, there's something, I'm going to use a word here, it's almost cruel, and this is the word that comes to my mind. To have a man leading a department and task force that specifically looks into missing and murdered Indigenous women. I don't know how you mash those two things together. If you're on that task force, how do you look at your boss with any kind of a credible eye and say, what do we do now, boss? What's our marching orders here? You see what I mean? There's a problem for the task force here, it seems to me.
There is, and I think it's an opportunity if there is a hearing and if he is confirmed, then he may have an opportunity to appoint someone to head up that particular task force. Someone who is passes that optics, for lack of a better term, and is a bit more connected with that particular issue from the victim advocate side.
See, that gets to Martha's point. There are plenty of people out there that have that role, what you just mentioned there.
Well, yeah, but Indian Affairs
Or that skill, I
Department
should say.
is much broader than the very important task force, no doubt.
Right.
But the optics of it, from the perspective of, you have the governor's office who has, been, defended. This is our choice. This is the person that we want to lead the Indian Affairs Department. And then you have the, Rules Committee. And Senator Katie Duhigg, who is saying, he's not scheduled yet. Right. And then in Thursday's Santa Fe New Mexican, the governor's office saying, well, we've not yet submitted the application, which is actually all part of the process. Right. But, I wonder what that would look like as far as having a hearing for his nomination. They would likely have to move it to the Senate chambers. And I think that there's probably a feeling maybe on both sides to, maybe a designee is an okay title to have. Wouldn't be the first person who's had that title connected with them for more than 4 years.
That's an interesting point there.
I
What do you
don't think that would do the trick, Tom. Putting him there with any title is offensive. I understand that from reading the news accounts that many of the women on that task force are prepared to resign from the task force if he is in fact chosen and confirmed. And that is a serious thing too. I wonder why this was ever even considered. It just doesn't make sense.
Let me keep you on that thought there about a Senate hearing. I mean, obviously there's a chance here for a lot of spectacle, a lot of emotion, a lot of everything. I got to think these Senate committees are going to want to avoid that. I just can't imagine going down. They've had a lot of things to do the last week of the session. This would eat up a lot of oxygen.
They may just run out the clock on it.
That's right.
And because, as I understand it, that is the end of this particular round of choosing someone. They'd have to start over if the session ends without any action. And maybe that's the best outcome, although I still think it makes the governor look very bad.
Quick question. I got to spin on some other cabinet stuff. Ed, on Martha's point of the governor, does she have wiggle room here to change her mind?
I think she does. As I mentioned earlier, listen to the people, listen to the people's concerns. And it's not necessarily a bad thing if the governor changes her mind. The governor just has to look at the concerns, listen to the people, and answer the question, can this individual be effective in this current role in light of all the circumstances? And I think that's a question that ultimately she's going to have to answer.
Good point there. Hey guys, a current cabinet secretary is facing criticism after finding the longtime director of the Office of Archaeological Studies, that's interesting, more than 100 museum professionals and public citizens co-signed a letter to the governor upset over the action from Cultural Affairs Secretary Deborah Garcia y Griego. She too was appointed by the governor. Now, Martha, does that level of influence and level of accountability for cabinet secretaries, what's going on here? We've got a lot of feet going out the door here. Should we be concerned?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Somebody is not paying attention, and you know where the buck stops always. It's at the top.
That's right.
I notice in both these cases, the governor herself is not commenting. She is delegating the comments, which is usual.
Right.
But something this serious, and I want to read for our audience what that letter you just referred to said. It said that Garcia y Griego has an inability to constructively address problems, manage and address shortcomings, but rather punitively looks for scapegoats. This latest firing of a very long-time employee with a sterling record and virtually marched out of the building.
Isn't that something?
It's outrageous.
I mean, archaeology? Tom, it's like, what could this poor man have done so he marched out the building?
Did he dig up some bones we didn't know about?
Exactly. Just a quick point on Martha's point. Since the secretary was chosen in 2019, 3 executive directors of the National Hispanic Cultural Center here in Albuquerque have been let go. Director vacancies at all 5 other state-run museums. This is not good. This is our calling card to the world, literally, our art.
It is, yeah, and the Cultural Affairs Department is world renowned, and
That's right.
on the flip side, please, I don't mean to be as glib, but I will say that this is really a cabinet secretary with quite a bit of tenure when you take a look at all the other departments and such.
there.
And it's always, what we do is we have a way to kind of look at things and then be that armchair quarterback. And without having the insight as far as any possible disciplinary records or any performance measures, things of that nature. So with all that said, I'll go back to the optics and how does this cabinet secretary rebuild trust within the department and then within the larger industry, and that can only really be done with consistency of product, and it's not happening right now with the rotation of different directors.
Interestingly, I mentioned the National Hispanic Cultural Center, Ed. Since Garcia Grego was appointed, 13 directors have either been let go or left their position as well. I mean, the turmoil here, no situation can run with this kind of turmoil.
You're absolutely right, Gene. I mean, it's very distracting, and it creates a lot of morale issues within the agencies and within the organizations. Now, the question here to ask are, what's this individual's key performance indicators? How do you know whether she's successful or not? Is turnover itself a key performance indicator? What about the other agencies? Are they experiencing similar turnover? So they really have to look at her role and what she's been called to do. Was she been asked to clean house? Were there issues that she's specifically focusing on that we don't know? And so we don't have enough information really to judge her overall work performance. Clearly, there are some concerns that probably need to be answered in the interest of this agency that she serves.
That's right.
Well, the 120 folks that signed the letter of concern is a point that we should take very seriously.
And the governor as well. Absolutely.
And the governor as well. And her spokesperson has said they want to continue to perform the mission of the department, and one has to wonder, is the mission of the department to gut the leadership?
Well, and that's
We have 5 state-run museums without directors right now. It's worth $3 million annually to the state. You can't be having that. Thanks to our Line Opinion panel. We'll be back here in about 10 minutes to talk through a new development in our state's struggle to pull literacy rates up from 50th in the country.